Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah ma ba'd. The question is asking about gathering to offer condolences for the deceased. Actually, he's got another question, which is, can we do this yearly to mark the anniversary of the death? I mean, we'll talk about that in a second. Let's just understand the actual mas'ala, which is, are we allowed to gather to offer condolences? Now, there are two types of gatherings. The first one is that you gather for the purpose of being supportive, making dua for the deceased, reminding them to be patient, meaning the family, and offering your condolences. That's the first type of gathering. That has a hukum. And then you have another type of gathering where you gather and you extend your stay and you share food and you have practices and rituals and you would do adhkar and those kind of things. That has a separate ruling. And we'll talk about these, inshallah, from the four madhahib. As for the first type of gathering, this is an issue where the scholars have differed. And the majority of the ulama have said that it is makruh to gather in any shape, in any way, shape or form whatsoever. Others from the ulama and from the contemporaries is the view of Sheikh Aziz bin Baz, and also has been narrated by some of the Malikiya, as we will quote later on, and some of the Hanafis as well, which is that it is allowed as long as it is brief. So you go to the house, it's convenient for you, there's a group of you and your family perhaps, go to your relative's house, offer your condolences, be supportive towards them, maybe bring them some food, and you leave, and then that's it. And for the evidences from those who say that it is permissible, in Bukhari and Muslim, Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that when a person used to pass away, إِذَا مَاتَ الْمَيِّتْ مِنْ أَهْلِهَا فَاجْتَمَعَ لِذَلِكَ النِّسَاء, women used to gather in the house of the deceased. The way that the majority have answered by this, they have said, no, it doesn't necessarily mean that they gathered in extending their stay. They used to visit, and they used to, because the remaining of the hadith, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam praised talbina, etc. And he said, give them talbina because yudhhab bihi al-huzn, and because through the talbina, it relinquishes the heart and it removes sadness, etc. So that's the way they've answered that, the view of the majority. There's another narration, and this is Abu Wa'il. He said that when Khalid bin Walid passed away, women from Banu al-Mughira, meaning his tribe, they gathered in the house of Khalid bin Walid. So a person went out to Umar to complain that, look, this is what's going on, and it shouldn't happen, so stop it from happening. So Umar bin Khattab responded, and this is the Musannif of Ibn Abi Shayba and Abdul Razak before, that he said, وَمَا عَلَيْهِنَّ أَن يُحْرِقْنَ مِن دُمُوعِهِنَّ عَلَىٰ أَبِي سُلَيْمَانَ. What's wrong with you that you're preventing them from crying over the passing of Abu Sulaiman? مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ نَقْعٌ أَوْ نَقَلْقَلَ. As long as there is no naq'a, that they are throwing sand over their heads, meaning a form of wailing, that they're ripping their clothes, etc. And there's no qalqala, meaning that they are not raising their voices. So from this we have a difference. Some of them have said that it is allowed to gather if it's convenient, as long as it is brief and you are, it's convenient for you, it's convenient for them, and you're reminding them, etc. Whereas the majority have said, no, even that is makruh. If the gathering now to offer condolences goes beyond a particular stay, or the past. So now here basically the second one is, we are gathering for the purpose of the deceased. Then the ulama have said that this is haram, and the ulama have said that this is a bid'ah, and the ulama have said that this should not happen for the purpose of the deceased. So we are serving food for the purpose of the deceased. We are reciting Quran for the purpose of the deceased. We are staying for 3, 4, 5 days to remember the deceased. Now here I just want to draw a line, which is the ulama, and this is not a discussion, perhaps we can have a separate clip for this. The ulama have differentiated between gathering for the deceased and gathering in order to serve the guest. Quite often what happens is that people come from outside the city to offer their condolences, but to help with the shrouding, to help with the burial, and then the family serve them food out of honouring the guest. The ulama have said that this takes a separate ruling completely. This is now something which is permissible, because this now, the intention is to serve the guest. So there is no harm in that, inshallah. Sometimes you could have a gathering where they are waiting for information, they're waiting for the body to arrive, waiting for the janazah to start. There is nothing wrong with that. That is completely separate. Here what we were talking about was they're gathering for the purpose of the deceased. to talk about them, to remember them, to do Quran for them, to do adhkar for them, to serve food on their name, etc. Jarir ibn Abdullah al-Bajali, from the companions of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Kunna na'ud al-ijtima' ila ahli mayyit." We used to see that gathering in the house of the deceased. That's number one. وَصَنِيَةُ الطَّعَامِ بَعْدَ دَفْنِهِ, and then preparing food. مِنَ النِّيَّةِ. We saw this as a form of wailing. Why are they preparing the food? They're doing it not for the purpose of the guest, but for the purpose of the fact that this person has passed away. Now from the aqwal and the statements of the ulama, from the Hanafis, Ibn Nujaym rahimahullah, he says, وَلَا بَأْسْ بِالْجُلُوسِ إِلَيْهَا ثَلَاثًا مِنْ غَيْرِ ارْتِكَابٍ مَحْظُورٍ مِنْ فَرَشٍ البسط والإطعام الطعام من أهل البيت. He said there is no harm in you offering your condolences, and like we've said before, this goes back to the previous type of sitting. Can we just visit them very briefly? He said there is no harm in it, as long as you don't extend your stay, as long as there isn't من غير ارتكاب محظور, as long as there isn't any wailing or anything like that, spreading of the furniture, spreading of the mattresses so people can stay. والإطعام الطعام من أهل البيت. And then the people who have had the deceased pass away, they have to now serve the guests. We have to now give out food for the sake of the deceased, etc. All of that is not permissible. So now he is differentiated between the two, and he said the first one is permissible, whereas the majority, like we have said, even the first one is makruh. Abu Bakr al-Turtushi from the Maliki, he said, from the Maliki scholars, he said, قال علماؤنا المالكيون, our scholars, the Maliki scholars, التصدي للعزاء بدعة ومكروه. Gathering for the purpose of the deceased is makruh, and it's a bid'ah. I mean makruh in the sense that it is haram. فأما إن قعد في بيته أو في المسجد محزون من غير أن يتصدر للعزاء فلا بأس به. As for, now here, these are the two types of sitting. He said the first one, in the example that we've got here, it is haram, and it's a bid'ah, where you are gathering for the purpose of the deceased. فأما إن قعد في بيته أو في المسجد محزون من غير أن يتصدر للعزاء فلا بأس به. If he sits with the person, meaning the family of the deceased, just very briefly to console them, etc., and then there is no harm in that. This is now again going back to the khilaf that we talked about and the difference of opinion when it comes to the first type of sitting. Is any type of sitting allowed? Some of them said, yeah, it is allowed because there isn't anything wrong with it. But the majority, like we have said, even the first type is not permissible. But the Maliki here have said that it is allowed, as long as, just what we've seen from the Hanafis, as long as it is free from any kind of prohibitions. Imam al-Shafi'i himself, وَأَكْرَهْ الْمَآتِمْ وَهِيَ الْجَمَاعَةِ, I dislike, and Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah explains in his Majmu' that the akrah here, what I dislike, what Imam al-Shafi'i dislikes, refers to what is haram. وَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُمْ بَكَى, even if there is no crying, فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ يُجَدِّدُ الْحُزْنَ وَيُكَلِّفُ الْمَؤُونَةِ. Even any kind of gathering, Imam al-Shafi'i is saying, even if there isn't any crying or wailing going on, because this will then renew the sadness. This will then open up the doors towards wailing. This will then also mean that the family of the deceased are now, looking after these people, as well as the fact that they are trying to deal with their loss. So they have said any kind of gathering, and this is what we were saying before. There are two types of gathering. The Shafi'is have said any kind of gathering is not permissible. Ibn Muflih from the Malikiyah, he said that it is makruh. Imam Ahmad disliked it. وَقِيل يَحْرُمْ, and some of them even said that it is haram. Imam Ahmad said, مَا يُعْجِبُنِي, I don't like it that they gather. Remember here we're just talking about normal gathering. وقال المروذي, Ibn Muflih saying here, المروذي, one of the ulama of the Hanabila, he said, هو من أفعال الجاهلية وأنكره شديدا. This is from the practices of Jahiliyyah, that they gather, irrespective of what they're doing, acts of worship or specifically for the deceased or not. Just gathering is not allowed. So now we have seen here the two types of gathering. Gathering for the sake of just gathering, and gathering for the sake of the deceased. The first one, some of them said that it's permissible as long as there hasn't got anything wrong with it, such as wailing and extended durations, etc. Whereas some of them have said that it is makruh, but they are all agreed that if it involves wailing and it involves overstaying, if it involves serving food for the deceased, if it involves doing things particularly for the deceased, then that is not allowed. Ibn al-Qayyim, he says, وكان من هديه صلى الله عليه وسلم تعزية لأهل الميت. From the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم is that he used to give his condolences to the family of the deceased. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ مِنْ هَدِيهِ, and it wasn't from his sunnah and his guidance أَنْ يَجْتَمِعِ الْأَذَى, that they gather in the house of the deceased for condolences. وَيَقْرَأُهُ الْقُرْآنِ. Now he's giving examples what that would consist of. You recite upon them Qur'an, that you do particular actions for the deceased. وَكُلُّ هَذَا بِدْعَةٌ حَادِثَةٌ مَكْرُوهَةٌ. All of this is bid'ah, all of this is innovated, all of it is haram. Therefore, we have the two types of gatherings. The first one is where it's what's convenient. Some of the scholars have said that it's permissible. Some of them have said that it is makruh. For me, what seems to be more correct is that it is permissible as long as it is brief and the conditions have been met. And for me, I take the opinion of Sheikh Razi bin Baz on that. Whereas others have said, no, it's not allowed. And there is an official fatwa from the Lajna Daima that all forms of gatherings are haram. Then you've got the second type of gathering where you're gathering for the purpose of the deceased, to do acts of worship for them, to feed people for them, to gather so that you can wail over them, etc. And this is without any doubt from the four madhabs impermissible. As Jarir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhu, he said, كُنَّا نَعُدُّهُ مِنَ النِّيَاهَةِ. We used to see this as a form of wailing. And then the third type, if we were to be even more technical, like I said, we're not going to discuss that here, but just to have, food for the guests that have come, and to prepare them on their journey back. Then inshallah, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. This is not included in what we are talking about when it comes to gathering for the purpose of the deceased and offering condolences. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has mercy on our deceased and He has mercy on us when we go through what they have gone through. هذا الله أعلم وصلى الله على محمد.